Welcome back to Arise Primetime, where we offer perspectives on the news and talking points of the day. I'm Charles Enyegolu, and I have two guest analysts with me for the rest of the program to offer their perspectives on some of the talking points and what you might have heard on the show today. And they are the current affairs analyst, professor of communications and deputy dean of the postgraduate school at Bayes University in Abuja, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, and the journalist, political affairs commentator, and Arise News analyst, Dr. Constance Ikokwu. Thank you very much indeed to both of you for coming in. I have to start with you, Prof.
Thank you very much.
You heard the opening, I mean, absolutely inspiring people there. Well, what do you make of what they're doing?
Well, I think life is actually driven by new ideas, new innovation. And sometimes we find it very difficult to think, whereas thinking is the bedrock of development. And we're having these two people coming up with this idea against the background of the growing number of out-of-school children that we have in this country. And most of them are actually out of school because of poverty, largely, and of course the ignorance of their parents, who probably find it difficult to help them in terms of encouragement, in terms of funding and all of that. And we're having this innovation. 100 naira may not be too difficult. Yes, it can be difficult for some families, but it may not at the end of the day be too difficult for some. And of course, for people who are charitably minded, philanthropists, even for middle class people to be able to afford it, may not necessarily be too difficult. So it's a great opportunity, a great window, to reduce the number of out-of-school children, and I think they deserve commendation. But I was actually, I felt benefited, when he said, hug a teacher, and I remember in the last couple of months, I can't remember the last time.
Well, you are a teacher, although you're a teacher at a much higher level. But I'm afraid I won't be giving you a hug. But although I commend the work that you're doing. I think you're one of the ones who are doing a fantastic job there. But Constance, listening to what they were saying, is there any way Nigeria can really become a developed country and move forward in an age of technology if it doesn't raise the quality of education and the education center to become education sector to become world class?
No, it's not possible.
Yeah.
Virtually impossible to become world class without high quality education. They say knowledge is power, and so the production of knowledge is logically the production of power. So especially indigenous knowledge and wisdom. Look at this couple, phenomenal, outstanding. I was completely blown away by this innovation, because it is an innovation. And the passion and the energy and the commitment that they are putting into the school, they are solving a problem in society. This is part of indigenous wisdom. You are in your environment, you understand the peculiarities, then you can begin to solve the problem. So that's the generation of knowledge, because most times we think that we have to go outside, bring in consultants, in other climes, pay them huge money to come in here and give us, spreadsheets, do this, do that, and they never work, and then you have inflated contracts on this kind of things. So one thing that I observed in what they said is that, she said that the private schools serve only 17% of the education population in Nigeria. That is huge. It means that the government has to put the focus right back into public education. Absolutely. Public schools. You need to make the investment, the necessary investment. You need to raise the quality, whether it's in the curriculum by redesigning them, like she said, also the quality of the teachers. Right. You need to do that. If you don't do that, then we're literally going nowhere. So
that's a good point.
Yes, so it's a lot of work, but it needs to be done. There will be resources and funding, but you can find them in Nigeria if we're serious about it. I mean, UNESCO says you have to spend 26% of your budget on education. We're not even spending 10%. So a lot of work for the incoming government.
And talking about the budget, which is a critical thing, as Dr. Ikokwu was pointing out there. I mean, can you see Nigeria budgeting 26% for education?
Well, that figure has actually been contested severally by the government, denying that UNESCO ever said so. but we do know that it's a reasonable benchmark, you know, and of course, there's no reason, if we are focused, if we prioritize it, if we privilege it, there's no reason why government cannot do it. Remember the much money that defense is taking, you know, and that came as a result of focus. And of course, we also know that some countries have in the past prioritized education. There was a time in the UK, there's a popular reference to that, when Tony Blair said in one particular year there's going to be education. And we know that you cannot have quality education if you don't have requisite infrastructure, requisite utilities, requisite environment, you know, and those things are not cheap. They do not come cheap. You know, they are capital intensive. You know, they need proper funding, and of course, those that provide the content, the lecturers too, you know, the teachers, you know, and they need motivation. And how do you motivate them? By appropriate remuneration.
Absolutely.
You know, largely comparable with what their peers in the rest of the world earn.
Absolutely.
By the time they are not remunerated, they become demotivated, and the ability to impart knowledge is actually weakened. You know, that's not what we want really, and that's why we have to continue to focus on it.
And talking about demotivation. I mean, demotivation actually leads people to do all kinds of dodgy things, doesn't it? I mean, one of the things that's been raised is that if you want to improve education in Nigeria, as Prof was saying, you've got to remunerate the teachers. And what happens is that, you know, if you don't do that, you start getting all kinds of things. You have to, for instance, eliminate exam malpractice. And there's a lot of that around, isn't there? So you've got people who bribe their way to a pass. They have certificates and qualifications, but they don't have any skills. So somebody will show you a certificate, and they don't know what, I mean, if you ask them, write an essay or whatever, they can't do it. I mean, so then, you know, that's because they never studied and they were never tested, basically.
You know, this is a great example, and I want to go back to what Paul Alaje said yesterday when he was...
That's the economist.
Exactly, when he was talking about the economy. He mentioned vocational and technical education, how important it is in this country. And I want to relate that with what you've just said. Not everybody needs to attend university. Not everybody is supposed to be a tertiary institution. We have different types of intelligence. So you want to create an educational space that accommodates all the types of intelligence and gives people opportunity to develop their capabilities, you know, their abilities, their talents, and their gifts. So, you know, I mean, we talk about IQ. There are people that have very high IQ, intelligence quotient. There are people that are stronger in social quotient, or adversity quotient, or emotional quotient. All these are abilities that, if they are harnessed properly, you would have a richer society. So these are things we have to begin to look into. And how do you do that, especially starting at the primary level? We need to find a way to make primary and secondary education free. It's possible. Everything is about planning and having a visionary leader that sees and ties the quality of education to the quality of the human capital, the human beings you produce, and then your economy. I mean, I have heard people say that we're looking for someone with skills to do certain things, and they can't find the skills. And then today you have a lot of Nigerians leaving the country, the middle class, with skills in droves. You have a problem.
That's a good point. And particularly in terms of vocational training. I mean, if you're going to build an economy, you've got to have a maintenance culture. You've got to have the plumbers, the electricians, all these people, and give them qualifications. In the UK, for example, you've got BTEC, which gives them all qualifications which they can hold up. It may not be a university degree, but it shows that they've passed the test. But let's move away from education, because there's another topic, Prof, that I wanted to bring up. And that's what appears to be a new way of computing labor force statistics. In other words, employment and unemployment. Apparently, the World Bank and Nigeria's National Bureau of Statistics, they've concluded a study using new guidelines issued by the International Labour Organization. And that study is set to reveal a sharp drop in unemployment in this country. Tell us more about this, because you attended a workshop on this as an academic observer.
Thank you very much. I was privileged to be one of the academic observers invited. There were professors, you know, experts from across the country, and even across the world. Perhaps it is also very important for us to know that statistics are not static. They are fluid. They mutate, and of course the mutation is a function of the methodology that you use at every point, at every stage. And this is also a reflection of changing reality.
Yeah, and we're seeing some of that on the screen.
So as realities change, you also have to change your methodology. And that's what we call in academic filling the gap. Now, from our understanding, the MBA is, of course, being led by professionals, professional core statisticians, presently headed by a gentleman, excellent gentleman, Prince Adeniyi. And of course, the idea is that, in 2020, there was a calculation that put it at 33% based on some standard methodologies.
That's unemployment.
Yeah, beyond that, we have also had, some other methodologies that have been recommended by ILO, a current updated methodology recommended by ILO, and that have been adopted by about 26 African countries. But we are still behind, and we're about to adopt it. We'll probably have adopted it now, which is one, you are removing the upper limits. We expect that the labor force is between ages 15 and 64.
Right.
But now you want to repeat that, or you want to remove that upper limit, because we have people who are retired, who are post age 64, and who are doing excellently well in terms of contributing, to the GDP.
Absolutely.
So you want to capture them.
Right.
Then secondly, you also want to reduce the question of hours. You don't want to say 20 hours. You want to say from 1 hour, because there are people who work less than 20 hours a day and who are contributing excellently well. How do you capture them as well? That's what the new methodology, I beg your pardon, is talking about. And thirdly, what about subsistence farmers? The previous methodology didn't capture them, but now it wants to capture them in accordance with new realities. And what about the question of the unemployed? The underemployed, I beg your pardon. The underemployed shouldn't just be those who work regularly between 9 to 5, and of course, but those who work between 9 to 5 and are still capable of doing all other kinds of work.
Right.
And of course, the one that may appear contentious is that how can you say somebody who works 1 hour a day, should be calculated
among. Let me let her respond to that, because that's actually a very that's the. I mean, I glanced at that.
That's right.
The material, cursorily, and I presume you did as well, because on the face of it, this new way of computing unemployment is supposed to reduce errors, but it seems unfair to include someone who works at least 1 hour a day as someone who is employed, because it's like, gross underemployment, if you ask me. What do you reckon, Constance?
Well, I am not an expert in this field. What I can say is that accurate data is crucial for planning for any country. We've had that problem in this country. So it makes sense to review or revise the methodology that we use to collect data and do scientific work. The National Bureau of Statistics in this country was literally dead until about 2011, when Dr. Yemi Kale was appointed as the CEO and Statistician General. He did a phenomenal job of turning that place around. Outstanding work. You could then go to the NBS, electronic, everything was digitized, was electronic. You can sit down on your desk, type and get the information that you need. And so the place came alive, and we began to see scientific survey tied to what was happening in the country, or what is still happening. And I hear that he's been replaced now by someone else. He left in 2021. And so I reckon that the good work continues, because the structure has been set up. But the thing is, I don't know if all this data that has been churned out by the NBS is used by the government at all. It would do us good to use this data, because we need accurate data to plan not only our economy, but other sectors of the country.
I have to say that it worries me, Prof, the idea of reducing the percentage of the unemployed, because there are a lot of people I would think that the number is even greater, because when the official statistic is 33.3 or whatever it is, but all the other estimates seem to suggest that it's much higher than that. So when you're bringing in statistics that is reducing that, It just seems to,
Yeah, well, first of all, statistics is not necessarily mathematics. Statistics is supposed to gauge, essences of life, so that you can have an idea, a broad idea towards policy formulation, etc., etc.
Yeah, but the governments are going to say, unemployment is
just give me a second.
Yeah, sorry.
And the second thing, again, is for us to understand that statistics should be apolitical, really.
Right.
We should devoid politics from it, because everything is based on empirical evidence. You are seeing the methodology, and your analysis should be based on the methodology used. So if you have any problem, the methodology of any research is actually the springboard. Start your disputation, your contestation with the methodology. If you have any problem with it, that's fine. And I understand that MBS is not working alone. They are working with the World Bank, working with ILO, and the methods are being used across countries in the world. And if you look at the details, you'll see that reasonably, after going through it, after listening to them spoke, I felt really convinced. For instance, the 1 hour question we're talking about.
Well, you sound convinced.
Yes, I felt okay. Now, if you listen to, if you bring up a Wole Soyinka, for instance, to come and talk to you, it's probably not going to spend for more than 1 hour. You chose to pay him. Sometimes people at those level may just want to speak pro bono, and you choose to pay him. How do you capture that in the labor brackets? You bring on
a good point.
Emeka Onyoko or Chimamanda Adichie or Falalu Bello to come and talk to you. They're not going to spend more than 45 minutes, but you have to capture that within the labor market. And of course, this new methodology as well, is more sustainable. Before it was, the calculations were done only on a weekly basis, maybe in the last 7 days or so, which was actually short and quite terminal. But now it's much more elongated, so they can capture the data on a much more elongated basis. Then you can be as close as possible to reality. Right. We're not saying that it is really perfect, but it can actually be indicative. But the danger we have that could come is if we begin to introduce politics into it, to begin to think that maybe it's meant to gratify
one government. You can be sure politics will be introduced.
But MBS over the years have come, like Constance said, have come up as a very reputable organization. Most of their pronouncements sometimes have even gone against government expectation. Look at some months ago when they said about 133 million Nigerians are in poverty, within the poverty range, are multidimensionally poor. Ordinarily, you wouldn't expect them to say that, but of course, they do not do their studies alone, which is why I think the one they are doing now is going to be credible at the end of the day.
But I mean, I think the point about politics creeping into it is not so much the NBS itself. It's the fact that the politicians will use that statistics. I mean, in any country it happens. I mean, if you've got the unemployment figures coming out in the UK or US, the politicians will say, hey, look what a fantastic job we're doing. But what I like about this particular one is that new methodology, assessing the working age, for example. Which would be, those aged 15 and above, and it would go beyond the 64 sort of mark. So I think that's quite a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, the other day in France, they were protesting because Macron was trying to raise the retirement age. I mean, these days, even in this report, I could see that it talks about people that are consultants, for instance. You could be 70 and you're at home, you're consulting via the internet. A very good point. So there are all sorts of ways, to work these days. I mean, we're in the 4th industrial revolution.
Absolutely.
We're talking about automation, advanced analytics. We're talking about AI.
You mean the world? Is
the world.
Yes. But not necessarily Nigeria.
But we shouldn't be left out.
We shouldn't. I agree.
I'm saying that to say that we need to wake up. Because our young people are waiting. Our young people are waiting for the leaders, to take charge, because they are very much interested in all that is happening. They are on the internet. They are seeing their colleagues in other parts of the world. I mean, the way that we live, work, communicate, relate has changed dramatically because of the internet, because of the 4th industrial revolution. So are we going to be onlookers or are we going to be participants? Are we going to do something about it? Are we going to enact policies that would, sort of bring in our young people that are smart, sharp, talented, and want to be part of what is going on in the world? The buck is at the president's table. The incoming president.
Very good point. And overall, Prof, I mean, you have the last word. We've got about a minute or so. It is your sense, is it, that these new labor market indicators will paint a more comprehensive and more statistically accurate picture of Nigeria's labor market?
Yeah, I think so, absolutely, Charles. Or maybe not, maybe I shouldn't use the word absolutely, but I think so. I'm quite convinced because they are using multi-method,
right.
A mix of qualitative and quantitative. And of course, modern research encourages you to use multi-methods,
right.
So you can be making constant comparative analysis. You can be reinforcing facts and dropping facts, And at the end of the day, once more, to take you as close as possible to the truth. But we have to understand that statistics are merely pointers, It is very difficult to gauge human interaction, human essences. What statistics does is just to give you a pointer through which policy projections can be made. And the prayer we should be making now, going into the next administration, is that they should be respectful of statistics. They should be respectful of data, so that our activities, our policies and projections, could be much more scientific, and it can only be so if they are funded on data that can come up from credible organizations like MBS.
And that's a good note to end on. I mean, it's always brilliant talking to a professor and a doctor.
My pleasure.
I mean, you couldn't wish for better analysis. Professor Abiodun Adeniyi is a current affairs analyst, professor of communications, and deputy dean of the postgraduate school at Bayes University in Abuja. And Dr. Constance Ikokwu is a journalist, political affairs commentator, and Arise News analyst. Thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.
Thank you.